Greetings, Hotep, Abiba Fahodie, Abiba Tumi. Welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's broadcast, where we'll be gathering here today for the second symposium organized by Jicho La Kimbunga, known as the Afrikan Survival Initiative. We have a dynamic presentation today, and actually a dynamic presenter today. He was one of the presenters for the last and the first event. But this time he's really come to bring the fire and focus on the issue that not only those within the United States of America need to understand, but that the whole Black world, the whole African world needs to understand this particular relationship and the dynamics of it. So the theme of today, the title of today's platform is U.S. government versus Black people. Very, 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 very big subject. Very broad subject, but if you know Brother Sam P.K. Collins, you know that you just need to really right now, while we're at it, go ahead and share, get people eyes and ears open to this program right now. I'm your host, again, I'm your moderator for today, Mansa Fode Ajamu, also known as Chief Fode Ajamu Mansaray, coming to you live from Freetown, Sierra Leone. And again, this is Kimbunga Media. We'll be talking about several issues. One, U.S. domestic policy, mass incarceration, war on drugs, food sovereignty, citizenship status, and much, much more. But without any further ado, before we go too far into any event, we always want to honor our ancestors and bring forth an elder who can bring them near us and also bless this occasion. With no further ado, I'd like to bring out our very own President General, veteran of the Garveyite movement of the UNIA ACL RC 2020, Achille and Kruma, straight out of Philadelphia, out so he can bless this occasion and bring the ancestors near.
Hotep, Baragani, Alafia, Baba Achille. And as we reach out to bring the ancestors into this movement, we always move forward with their guidance, with their blessings, and we always want them around us. That's what strengthens us. So I'm going to call on Brother Kwame Nkrumah, bring his spirit. I want to call on Sister Henrietta Vena Davis and bring her spirit. None other than Amy Jacques Garvey, Amy Ashwood Garvey, Marcus Messiah Garvey, Brother Renoko, Brother Farouk. We want to bring all these ancestors back, Brother Asim Nkrumah, for them to be a part of this and know their guidance. I know that there are names that I have not mentioned, but all those names recognize that they are called. And also call on ancestors from your own family, because as you call names where you are, we bring them into this circle. So I will give my name, my father's name, Frank and Betty Murphy, my grandparents' name, James and Alice Palmer. I want to bring them all into this movement. Brother Ronald Funzi and Nkrumah as well. I want to understand that we move forward together, and together there is power, and in power there is freedom. Umoja Tutashinda. Black power.
PG, thank you very much. And moving right along, I have to shamelessly promote a very serious program activity that I want to draw the attention of the entire African world to, that I'm actively leading up and involved in here in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And that is no other than what we call the Mali Center, or Mosiah Academy Leadership Institute. Actually a brick and mortar situation. We actually, we can announce right now actually that we was able to lease the office this afternoon, and all from resources donated through the crowdfunding that we got going on. Those who are interested in supporting this initiative to establish a Pan-African education and leadership training institute right here in Freetown, Sierra Leone, which we have online and hands-on in the flesh, right in person, training here in the country, as well as online for those who are here. Moving forward, we want to be able to produce our own leaders. We want to be able to set the standards for what our future leaders would be. And by doing this, this activity that we're embarking on, we're creating an opportunity for young people, just people in general in the community, to come and be part of the process of building Pan-Africanism materially right now on the continent, and really creating a new practical and principled form of scientific Garveyism that we can use moving forward as African people all around the world. So those of you out there, Pan-Africanists, Garveyites, whatever your denomination is, we need your support here in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Again, just this afternoon, we was able to secure the facilities, and we have access to a compound which is situated on about an acre of land, and there's a swimming pool, there's a hotel there, there's different facilities on the one compound, but we have an office right there in Culture Radio 104.5 FM here in Freetown. So we share office with a radio station, and in the future we'll be also coordinating with them to develop a radio program coming out of Freetown as well, and also having the dynamic of having online appeal. We want people to be able to also get these lessons. We'll be setting up our project over on bibitumi.com as well, to make sure that we're supporting that independent African Center initiative there as well. But we're going to be right there on YouTube, probably do a little Patreon, but definitely ready to teach a whole new generation here in this country the basic principles and values of Pan-Africanism. And so that's what we're doing, guys. With no further ado, I really want to be kind of fast with this situation, because I'm ready for the presentation. I already know what Brother Sam P.K. Collins does. And if you're new to Jicho La Kimbunga, We're a brotherhood of serious African men all around the world. We're a small group, but a very devoted group. And this is our first initiative that we're bringing forward to the community. So again, share, like, and don't be afraid to comment. We do have a panel conversation coming up as well after this presentation. We have some dynamic brothers from Jicho La Kimbunga coming forward. You're going to know some of them you might not know, but we're going to have a dynamic conversation, so stay where you are. But at this time, I want to present our brother, a dynamic Pan-Africanist journalist. He's based out of Washington, D.C. He has heritage ancestry connecting to the country of Liberia. This is our brother. This is our king, Sam P.K. Collins. I want y'all to really get his brother your attention. And again, share this. Share it right now. Share it while it's hot. All right?
Peace and blessings, Habari Ghani, Hotep. Many thanks, Chief O'Day, for the introduction. Shout out to Kimbunga Media, and most importantly, shout out to this esteemed brotherhood for the opportunity always to just reason with like-minded brothers and to continue spreading the good message of Garveyism and all that it entails. My name is Sam P.K. Collins. I'm a grassroots journalist, educator, and author based out of Washington, D.C., what I like to call Banneker City. Today's presentation is the second presentation that I've made as a part of this initiative, and we're getting a bit more domestic. The U.S. government versus Black people. Again, this is a Garveyite analysis. Before we move on, I just want to preface this by saying that I'm an 80s baby, 90s kid. So I was born in 89, raised throughout the 90s and the 2000s. So this presentation is near and dear to my heart because I grew up through these times. And I grew up as a first generation American, somebody whose parents came from Liberia, which at that time was experiencing civil war. So a lot of the striver conversation that was happening in my home was happening in other Black homes, even as we were dealing with the effects of the crack war and whatever else. So you're looking at this presentation in that context. And, all that you're going to see today will, I hope at least, further affirm the need for us to come together as one and to practice the tenets of Garveyism in real time. So without further ado, here's my presentation. You guys are definitely in for a treat. Yes, I. So this is pretty much the Garveyite analysis, U.S. government versus Black people. Don't get it twisted. It's still happening to this day. Next slide, please. So this presentation, as I was saying before, it aims to examine the effects of the Clinton administration, the Bush 43 administration, and the Obama administration as it relates to domestic policy with Black people. This will be done from a Garveyite perspective, meaning that we are assessing how Black people fared collectively, regardless of class, ethnicity, or whatever else, but especially class, regardless of class. We are going to examine how the Black family collectively fared under these three administrations. And before we move on, I just want to credit this photo. I got it off of Wikipedia this morning, but this was from the Million Man March in 1995. The Million Man March, under the leadership of Minister Louis Farrakhan and several others who he collaborated with, took place on the National Mall in D.C., and it was in response to the very same issues that we continue to face today. So even as we saw Black faces in high places throughout the Clinton, Bush 43, and Obama administrations, the masses of Black people were still suffering in terms of economics and their relationship with the law. And Minister Louis Farrakhan called out millions of Black people to speak to that or to press for that in October of 1995. So we're definitely going to move on to the next slide. So who's a Garveyite? According to Tony Martin, a Garveyite espouses three principles. We went over this last time. There's a race-first allegiance, first of all. So an allegiance to the Black race, just as other races practice. There's also a spirit of self-reliance, kujichagulia, self-determination. So to what degree are we as a Black nation developing and patronizing Black-owned, Black-operated institutions? And to what degree are these institutions serving the collective need of the Black masses? And finally, last but not least, nationhood, the creation of a Black nation on the African continent. For the purposes of this presentation, and as I always do, and as I would expect anybody else to do, we are going to look at Africans in the United States of America as a nation within the nation, just as Martin Delany did, just as the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey did, just as Malcolm X did, just as the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa did. We are a nation within a nation. So that's going to be the framework for this presentation. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with the Clinton years. We're talking about 1993 up until 2001 into the 21st century. We are going to touch on Reagan and Bush 41 during the panel, but I just want to set the stage for what happened during the Clinton presidency. Clinton came in not too long after the fall of the Soviet Union. So from World War II up until the early 1990s, the United States and the Soviet Union were going toe-to-toe in what was called the Cold War. This was when they were stockpiling weapons. This was when they were engaging in proxy wars with Cuba and just whoever else. And the African world felt that because depending on who they pledged allegiance to, that dictated their relationship with the United States and whether or not their governments got toppled and disrupted. But with the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States assumed a position in the global hierarchy as the end-all be-all and as a model for Western liberal democracy. So what you can see throughout the 1990s and beyond, at least until September 11th, was Americanism revitalized, where America, like I said before, was the standard bearer of what it meant to be a global citizen. And with that came African Americans or Africans in America as it relates to culture, politics, and whatever else, assuming positions of their own. So on the surface, the Oprah Winfreys, the Eddie Murphys, the Magic Johnsons, the mavens of industry in all segments of society were becoming Black. But that doesn't mean that Black people were in the masses, in the lower classes, were faring just as well. And this presentation is going to speak to that. And I want you to pay attention to one thing at the very bottom of this slide. With Americanism assuming this new place in the world as the standard bearer of what it means to be a global citizen, with that came an emphasis on work ethic, Protestant work ethic at that, and law and order. And we see two of these themes permeate throughout Clintonian policies of the 1990s. Next slide, please. So before I move on, we gotta, once again, talk about the Black folks that were peppered throughout the Clinton administration. He named at that time what was considered the highest number of American Africans to his first term cabinet. One of those figures is pictured here, the late Ron Brown. We also have Mike Espy, who was the Secretary of Agriculture, Hazel R. O'Leary, Secretary of Energy, and Jesse Brown, Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Next slide, please. But all the while, with Black people assuming high positions of power within the U.S. government and within the private industries, the masses of Black people were still suffering. And Clinton's economic policy on Black people, during that time, the poorest of us experienced a decline in income as the wealthiest of us saw the income increase. So the gap between the Black and white median income grew even wider during the Clinton period. And Clinton's economic policies, while people deemed them as better compared to Bush's, those economic policies did not change the overall economic conditions of Black people because they did not take into account factors and just situations that were already put in place before Clinton came into office. And those factors are called spatial mismatching, income and employment inequality, workforce discrimination, and poor education. And this was especially the case in portions of the South that had not been touched by industrialization. So our brothers and sisters in the Delta regions and in other parts of the South were still living in the 1950s and 60s, even as the more affluent of us were assuming positions of power in this country. And then we take it to welfare reform. So let's keep this in mind, and this is not to put it all at the feet of the president. We are in the U.S. government, which has 3 branches of government, with journalists being the 4th branch or the 4th estate. But the 3 branches of government are the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. So as far as Clinton's policies during that time, one can argue that to some extent he was influenced by the Republican majority that controlled both houses during what was called the Republican Revolution. But as you'll see with President Obama, Bill Clinton was a centrist. And oftentimes in American politics, in order to make it to the plateau of American politics, you have to be a centrist. A centrist meaning that somebody who is not too conservative or somebody who is not too liberal. So what often masquerades as liberalism in this country oftentimes is centrism. And that centrism uses Black people as a trump card, in the sense that we are often traded politically to make deals that benefit the executive while benefiting the more conservative elements of the legislative branch. And that is exactly what happened during the 1990s. The Republicans, as the Democrats will tell you, they pigeonholed Bill Clinton into making these decisions. But Bill Clinton already had a conservative mindset when, during the debates leading to his presidency, he said that he would end welfare as we know it. And he did that through between 1993 and 1996, when he replaced what was called aid to families with dependent children with TANF, also known as temporary assistance to needy families. And with that came an imposition on a 5-year lifetime limit on benefits. So no longer could people be on benefits throughout their life or intergenerationally. They would have to prove employment to get benefits, first of all, and then those benefits would taper off. This federal legislation that Congress conjured up and Bill Clinton signed was experimented on in different states. 43 of those states applied for waivers to adjust the previous program to make these programs more conservative. And this came out of the anti-poverty rhetoric that George Bush the first took on, Bush 41, as well as Ronald Reagan when he had trickle-down economics. In addition, Bill Clinton also expanded the earned income tax credit. Some people would argue that despite what he did for welfare, that the earned income tax credit was a benefit to a wide segment of American Africans. 1.1 million of those American Africans benefited because they had children and they had accumulated low to moderate income. To this day, and especially during the pandemic, the earned income tax credit has been a great saving grace to Black people. I know we have running jokes all of the time. During tax season, you take on people's kids or, parents. They might fight over who can claim which kid, but this is the reason why. The earned income tax credit benefited American Africans during one time of the year when they could claim children on their benefits or on their taxes and get that money back that they overpaid the government anyway. Now, in terms of the effects overall of the earned income tax credit, an analysis by Jacobin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, it found that the policy only helped the working poor and not the extremely poor, meaning that, again, a Protestant work ethic type of mentality that Bill Clinton and the Republicans of that so-called Republican Revolution had imposed made its way even into the tax policy. So once again, those of us who are generationally impoverished end up losing because we did not work out of what they thought was pure laziness, when in fact it was due to policies that were set up long before Clinton had come into office that Clinton did not account for when he made this policy. And before we move on, you guys are going to see a constant theme, like I'm telling y'all again. American politicians, especially those who are from both parties, both majority parties, who rise through the ranks and become executives, they often make compromises and become centrist so that they don't have any need, or they don't feel any need to take on the more liberal or what they deem the more extreme policy suggestions of those of us in the trenches. And Bill Clinton did just that. Okay, y'all, you guys are in for a woozy. Along with welfare reform, along with the income tax credit that did not work, Bill Clinton also exported factory jobs. He exported factory jobs and he shrank the size of government. Okay, these are two policies that affected American Africans, seeing as though since the Great Migration and since World War II, American Africans accounted for a sizable population or portion of the automotive industry's workforce in the Midwest. Those jobs got shipped to Canada and Mexico, and Black people suffered as a result of that. Once Bill Clinton shrank the government to save money, we're talking about the greatest reduction of the federal government not seen since John F. Kennedy's administration. That affected American Africans who had just started coming into the federal workforce. So these are the jobs that we depend on. And even as Bill Clinton's taking them, we look at him as the quote unquote first Black president because he plays the saxophone, because he got caught getting fellatio from Monica Lewinsky in the White House, in the Oval Office. But he did these things and comedians led us astray, even as he approved laws and policies that decimated whatever chance working class and impoverished Black people had to make it in this country. And again, we're talking about the collective progress of Black people, not just those in his administration, not just those who interviewed him, who are in the same class as him, but the masses of African people living in the United States. Once again, we're coming to crime. You know, again, crime is an indication of the socioeconomic conditions that are at play. The more crime you see in the city, the more crime you see on Wall Street. The more crime you see in the city, in the streets, the more crimes you see in the White House and with the government that is entrusted, right? That is entrusted to help the people. And once again, with all of this criminality going on in the form of siphoning resources for the 1%, and while wagging their fingers at the lowest of us, Bill Clinton, again, working with the Republicans, imposed a crime bill. The infamous 1994 crime bill, which is 30 years old, it imposed tougher penalties for crimes, including the 3 strikes rule, and it also financed a prison industry boom. Another bill that Clinton signed authorized spending for 100,000 community police officers. Now, let me give y'all some context. By 1993, Los Angeles was already doing something similar. And Ronald Reagan, a movie star turned president, came out of, he might have been a governor at one point, if I recall correctly. He came out of California. Under Ronald Reagan's presidency, the mental health institutions got defunded at the state level. So with the closing of the mental health institutions, a lot of people who were diagnosed with mental illnesses, including Africans, were funneled into the prison system. And the crime bill here exacerbated the prison population, causing overcrowding and causing the creation of prisons, many of which are found in rural America, majority white towns, right, that are far away from the city, where these brothers and sisters are getting prosecuted. Once they get prosecuted and they go through the system, they're convicted, they're being shipped off to prisons that are being constructed in rural America, where the COs and the prison wardens and just whoever else are residents of those white towns. So Bill Clinton, a white president, the so-called first black president, worked with white Republicans, Newt Gingrich and whoever else, to boom the prison population. After decimating welfare, after shipping jobs out of the country, after creating tax policy that only skimmed at the problem and did not decimate it. Pitiful. Now we're done with Clinton, those 2 terms, and now we're on to the Bush, the second Bush, Bush 43, the more charismatic but not as intelligent Bush, the Bush who was able to speak plainly, the Bush that became popular after 9/11 and leveraged that popularity to roll back a lot of the rights that we thought we could enjoy in this country. I'm going to look at Bush's policies in the realms of education, defense, economics, and emergency response when it comes to infrastructural deficits. So as you can see, between 2001 and 2009, when he came in, George Walker Bush, the son of George Herbert Walker Bush, had the highest and lowest ratings of any president in modern history. You're going to see why. No Child Left Behind, no Child Left Behind Act. This act was introduced into law in 2001 and 2002. I'm going to age myself a bit. I was a 7th or 8th grader around that time, and I was actually at an event where they celebrated No Child Left Behind. This law paved the way for school privatization because it tied the support that schools would get to the test scores that they had accumulated. So if you are a school that is already suffering, not by virtue of what students have in their capacity to learn or by virtue of teacher performance, but if you're a school that's suffering because of the circumstances of the neighborhood in which you are located, then you were the ones suffering the most with No Child Left Behind. Black teachers got replaced at schools because they lost their jobs. Schools lost funding because of No Child Left Behind. And the passage of No Child Left Behind aligns with the proliferation of teachers from Teach for America, a program through which teachers or college graduates can study teaching or be in the classroom for 2 years before coming in there full time. And oftentimes these teachers from Teach for America, they are often not Black. They're often white liberals or white conservatives from middle America or wherever else who come into majority Black cities, and they're teaching our children in public schools that are no longer getting funded because of No Child Left Behind. So with No Child Left Behind, not only came the decimation of the Black teacher force, but also came the privatization of schools through the public charter school movement. The charter school movement not only decimated our public schools, but they decimated our African-centered schools. With the introduction of the public charter school system, parents who saw this alternative saw a need to no longer pay tuition at their African-centered schools, but to enroll their children in these experimental public charter schools that turned out being just as worse in many cases, with no accountability to the government while they're getting public funds. And No Child Left Behind started all of this. For those of y'all who are old enough to remember, or cognizant enough to remember, there was an Atlanta cheating scandal where teachers took standardized tests and they went behind their students and changed the answers to tip the scales in their favor to make sure that their jobs were being saved. The focus on standardized testing not only exacerbated the education problem, it made it so that the children of today who are entering college don't know how to write. A lot of them struggle in the critical thinking part of the college curriculum, and a lot of them, most importantly, are not able to form their own opinions. So we are having a class of children who are being educated to be workers instead of critical thinkers. We are no longer reading the whole book. We are just reading passages because No Child Left Behind put an emphasis on testing and looking the part more so than changing the structural circumstances of what caused the so-called achievement gap. Oh man, going back to 9/11. 9/11 gave George W. Bush the license. And again, we're talking about the three branches and the fourth estate being the media. The media, the New York Times in particular, they took George W. Bush at his word. They took the late Colin Powell at his word. They took Condoleezza Rice at her word. Condoleezza Rice and the late Colin Powell, both being black people, black faces in high places, orchestrating this scheme to send hundreds and thousands of soldiers over to Iraq and to Afghanistan on a mission that had no end in sight. And as he did that, George W. Bush's government launched the Department of Homeland Security, phone taps, and other schemes that were targeted at those of us who were practicing Islam. And if you're black and practicing Islam, then you got it just as bad. And that was the case for Imam Jamil Al-Amin, also known as H. Rap Brown. From the time that he came home in the 70s up until the time of his reincarceration in early 2000s, he was a target of the U.S. government, even though he had taken on what some might consider a less radical tone in his rhetoric. And he was speaking more about spiritual atonement. They still had his eyes on him. And to this day, he is serving life in prison for a crime that the evidence shows he did not commit. But what's even more interesting than the imam's incarceration was what happened before that, what inspired that. If you go to the Detroit area, Imam Lukman Abdullah, and this happened under the Obama administration, but that was a holdover from the Bush administration. The Secret Service or the FBI or the CIA, they were looking at this brother because they thought that he had connections to Al Qaeda or to any other terrorist, so-called terrorist organization. So we see an infringement on human rights being inflicted upon our people, particularly those of us who practice Islam, and this happened under the Bush administration. Another aspect of the Bush administration dealt with subprime mortgages. So President Bush, Bush II, he really prided his administration on boosting black home ownership, and that's all well and done and true, but the circumstances of that did not do this country too well. When you give out loans to people who cannot afford to pay it back, and you have an economy in which the 1% are getting taxed much less than those of us on Main Street, then you're concocting a formula that will end up disastrous. And what came out of that was the Great Recession, during which those of us who bought homes with these crazy loans and whatever else and these interest rates, the values of the homes became lower than what we bought it for. That's what's called the house going underwater. So as the recession came, we lost our jobs, we had these mortgages that we could not afford to pay, and we were sitting on houses that had no value. The people who actually did that were the ones to blame, because for years, Wall Street was gaming the system. And under George Bush's watch, they did so with tax breaks, and they did so while giving us, who could not afford to pay for these houses in the first place, loans that were out of this world. Speaking of housing and speaking of black people, of course, you have Hurricane Katrina. This happened during the Bush administration, and it happened right after the Bush administration rolled back 3 decades of environmental protections. Bush also faced criticism for not mentioning the disaster during his 2006 and 2007 State of the Union addresses. And as far as Katrina, the administration knew of its arrival and they did nothing. And they went on to deny their prior knowledge of that. Bush also failed to end his vacation to respond to that. And all while that was happening, Vice President Dick Cheney was trying to divert power from New Orleans hospitals to Mississippi oil machines. So with the Bush administration, more so than the other administrations, it was always profit over people. And neither Department of Human Services or FEMA acted quickly to rescue refugees. And quiet as kept, the Cuban government, with all that was going on between that government and the US, did more to help our people than the Bush administration did. And you'll see the same when it came to COVID, when it came to Ebola. The Cuban government oftentimes had its hand out ready to help those of us living here in the United States of America. But just so that you guys know, the Bush administration did not do much in terms of preventing Katrina or preventing the damage to Katrina, nor did they do much in terms of immediately evacuating and rescuing those thousands of African people. Just like Kanye said, Bush does not care about Black people. So that brings us into the Obama administration. And for those of y'all who were around during that time, it was quite a time to be alive. I was a college sophomore when Obama came into office. I did not run down to the White House with my friends. I was working that night, had to get some money. But what I saw during the Obama years, gentrification in the district, seeing as though thousands upon thousands of young multicultural professionals came into the nation's capital and they set up shop here to work in the Obama administration. I saw brothers cutting their locks because they saw a Black man in the White House with whom they can identify. I saw rappers voting for the first time and espousing a future that they were hopeful for. Obama record will show that none of that quite came into fruition during his 8 years in office. And as liberal as Obama, or as some people thought Obama to be, because Obama, like Clinton, was more of a moderate, President Obama brought some holdovers from the Bush administration. See, when you're examining these heads of state, you can't look at them as the head. You have to look at who's around them, who's determining their policy, who are they working in alignment with. And President Obama held over the Fed chair, Ben Bernanke, who oversaw the Great Recession of the previous administration. He held over Defense Secretary Robert Gates, Sheila Bair of the FDIC, Ray LaHood, Transportation Secretary, and Francis Collins of the National Institute of Health. So these are holdovers from the Obama administration, and they to some degree determined the policy, at least of his first term. Speaking of the first term, and here I have to acknowledge Dr. Cornel West and Tavis Smiley. These two brothers here were supporters of Barack Obama. And people will try to tell you that they fell out of favor with the president because they were not invited to the inauguration or to the inauguration activities that you have to have a backstage pass for, whatever the case is. They will try to tell you that their critiques of the Obama administration were seeped in that. But that is far from the case, and that is due to my analysis. And no means am I a surrogate of either of these gentlemen, but I'm giving an analysis in the sense that, again, we're going back to a Garveyite analysis, a total examination of the collective well-being of Black people, right? Time and time again, we've had Black people in high places, but the rest of us did not fare too well during these times. And you'll see that even while running as president, President Barack Obama, while serving as senator representing Illinois, he did some work in the background, wheeling and dealing with his colleagues in the Senate and even in Congress. And he got enough votes. He secured enough votes as a senator to get a $350 billion bailout of the banks. A bailout meaning a cash infusion from the Treasury. The Treasury was approved by Barack Obama and his congressional colleagues to pour more money into the very banks that caused the Great Recession. And around that time, as he was doing that, those very same banks contributed $8 million in political contributions to his campaign. So before he came into office, Barack Obama showed his true face card in terms of what he was willing to do for the banks, and less so the people of middle and lower America. In the spirit of deficit reduction, President Barack Obama even worked with Republicans and Democrats of the conservative kind to pass a bill that made it so that he was no longer able to bail out homeowners. So these millions and millions and billions of dollars that are going to the banks, a lot of that did not reach the homeowners who had underwater mortgages and who were out of jobs during the Bush years. All of this happened during the first term of the Obama administration when the Democrats had the majority. Because mind you, the Democrats lost the majority during the midterm elections of 2009, but they had the majority before then. And Barack Obama still did this. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Care Act. Big Pharma got his hands on it. You know, all throughout this whole campaign, we were talking about universal health care, you know, a one-payer system or one person, one healthcare system, whatever it's called. And the president did not make good on that. He made a compromise that he always does. And, you know, President Obama was never one to call himself a liberal. As a matter of fact, he was one that was always calculated. He spoke very calculated. He paused oftentimes when he spoke, and he made his decisions in the very same way. What you saw during those 8 years was a man who was afraid to step on any toes. And you saw that with the way that he had even abandoned Reverend Wright out of Chicago, the Reverend who mentored him, who, from my understanding, presided over his marriage with Michelle Obama, right? A guy who he looked up to. This was a guy who he threw under the bus when the footage of the Reverend's past sermons came out, in which he condemned America to damnation. Now, if you're a president, or if you're the first black president, or the first guy who looks like the first black guy who's looking like he's going to get close to the presidency, of course, you know, unless you go hard, you know, but you don't go hard, you're going to throw your mentor under the bus. Reverend Jeremiah Wright, he did that. They gave some indication of what Obama was going to do during his presidency. And he did just that with Obamacare. You know, wheeling and dealing with then Vice President Joe Biden on his side, trying to reach compromises. But what people don't understand is that when it comes to the political system, it is less so about the political parties and more so about the moneyed interests that are backing them. So the pharmaceutical industry could not stand to lose in this battle, which is why they infused dollars to make sure that the healthcare system was still working in its favor. So instead of people getting free healthcare, you had to buy into systems, right? Instead of, you know, everybody getting what they needed, there was still a way where at one point in time, people were being penalized by way of their taxes for not having healthcare. People were being forced into getting healthcare. My understanding is that years ago, the government did away with that. But even with what people may consider the best form of healthcare coverage this country has ever had, people's premiums were still too high. So even if you had coverage, either you had high premiums or either you took on plans that did not have much coverage, because the patchwork of the system was just that, a patchwork. It was not a nationalized system like what other countries see. And that's because Big Pharma wanted to keep it privatized, and President Obama, not wanting to step on any toes within Congress or within a Big Pharma, decided to keep it that way. And one more thing before we move on, we can keep it here, but before we move on, right? We're talking about public health, okay? Healthcare alone is not going to do it for Black people. We have to address the infrastructural inequalities, our lack of access to clean water, to clean foods, healthy foods, the high level of stress that we have in this country. We got to address all of that. And we have to make it so that we have more clinics in our communities where people can practice so-called alternative medicine, what I like to call natural medicine, non-Babylonian medicine. But without that, then this whole healthcare discussion is for naught. And the Obama administration did not really take too much part in that dialogue. The closest they did was when they attempted to discourage Black people from making emergency room visits. They tried encouraging us to, go to our primary care provider to be preemptive instead of being reactive to illnesses. But even with that analysis does not take into account the intergenerational traumas that Obama's predecessors to some degree perpetuated when they passed laws and kept systems in place that kept us in communities that were making us unhealthy all along. So we're going to move on to police brutality. And this picture here is from the Beer Summit. So Henry Louis Gates, a scholar, a well-known scholar at that, he was profiled at his home. This is the officer, if I remember correctly, who profiled him. President Obama, he spoke some truth. He called it a dumb decision on the part of the officer for profiling the doctor here. And he caught a lot of, fire for that. And Obama, always doing what he does, he took the middle road. He drew back that comment. And instead of tackling the systemic issue of police brutality, he held a beer summit. He treated this issue of police profiling as if it was a one-off, as if it was a situation that only affected one person, that it was an anomaly, when in fact it was a systemic issue that affects Black people and has affected Black people. But Obama did not take that into consideration, nor did he address that until well into the so-called Black Lives Matter movement, during which we saw African men and women standing up against the police departments in various cities throughout this country, United States. So what I will give the Obama administration some credit for was its Justice Department investigating 21 police departments. And those resulted in settlements and the monitoring of those departments. It also compelled some police departments to reach out for de-escalation training and others, and just other things to help them become more, friendly to Black people. But just as many police departments fought back against the Justice Department, and it got to the point where the Justice Department was accused of some overreach. So even as they attempted to secure justice, it just could not be done. And that was especially in the case of Mike Brown's death. Eric Holder's Justice Department did not find any reason to prosecute Darren Wilson in Mike Brown's death. He didn't find any indication that Mike Brown had his hands up when he was shot to the ground during that August day, which baffles me to this very day. But again, it shows the limits that it shows a limit to what President Obama was willing to do. And even as he did that, he vilified protesters. He vilified those who rightfully took their anger to the streets. And even as he did that, his FBI, in conjunction with the New Jersey government, increased the reward for Assata Shakur's capture. The same Assata Shakur that, held her own. She defended herself and was framed, and she escaped prison. And even as the U.S. government was negotiating the terms of its relationship with Cuba, there was some discussion about how to bring Assata back under the Obama administration. How's that for the first Black president? Just wait till you guys see what happens, because we're going to have the foreign policy part of this discussion in 2 weeks. Just wait till y'all see that, because that's even crazier. Next slide, please. The Flint water crisis. President Obama here, by the time this picture was taken, legions of African children in Flint either had ADHD, Legionnaire's disease, or any other kind of pneumonia or brain-altering ailment that was caused by the high levels of lead and chlorine that was in the Flint water supply. And by the time that Obama had come down to Flint, the EPA, known as the Environmental Protection Agency, had already known about what was going on in Flint. But it took a year for the administration to address it, to address what the United Nations had called a human rights disaster. And to this day, 10 years later, residents are still fighting for clean water. This is despite the water supply being turned back to a cleaner source. They're still fighting for clean water to this very day because of what the Obama administration and the state government under Government Snyder failed to do. So key takeaways for this presentation, and I'll preface my takeaways by saying that I could have gone in a lot more deeply. I went in as deeply as I could in the interest of time. But what I want everybody here to understand, and if we can go to the next slide, that Black faces in high places has never done us any good as Black people in this country. And what you'll see here, that in the Clinton, Bush 43, Obama era, it was an era of Black buy-in into the American dream. It was an era of Americanism where we were expected to practice color blindness and where America was put on the pedestal of the world stage as the end-all be-all and the progenitor of what was right and what was wrong. So with that, there's a lot of envy for Black people in other parts of the world and a lot of misunderstanding, as I define it, about the Black situation here. Just because we have our Oprahs and our Bob Johnsons and our whoever else does not mean that all Black people are doing well. And it does not mean that we are spoiled. We have more access to money, of course, but where does that money go? We're robbing Peter to pay Paul over here because the policies of the Clinton, Bush 43, and Obama eras exacerbated the wealth gap, and it further emboldened Wall Street to close off the American dream, the so-called American dream, to the least of us. So speaking as a Garveyite, I have to say that this was not Garveyism at all, that it was the perpetuation of the same policies that have held the majority of our people back. And as we go further and further along in our history and into contemporary times, the powers that be are further positioning people who look just like us to make sure that we buy into these policies. And that is exactly what is continuing to happen. And as a matter of fact, I will end here by saying that the Obama presidency demolished any prospects. I wouldn't say demolished totally, but it further hampered efforts to promote nationalism among Black people. Because with Obama at the top, that signaled to those of us who are not too well versed in what America could do, that signaled for us some hope that we could make it to in this system, when in fact that is not the case. Because once again, when it comes to Garveyism, we're talking about the collective well-being of the Black nation in the United States. And collectively, we have not done good, and we continue to not do good. As long as, that's just the case. And I will end there. Sante Sana.
Wow. Wow. Sam, you smoked it. It's over. I don't need to see any more presentations on that subject again. You did a great job, brother. Very powerful presentation. And I love the way that you took us chronologically from the Clinton administration on up to this moment, actually, in terms of policies. And for me, being someone who lived through that time as well, probably a few years older than you, but I lived through that time as well as a young person. Growing up in the 90s, there's no way that I would have understood that. It's good to do these, 2020, hindsight perspectives as we, lay out this analysis as Garveyites, particularly at this time. Just to say it one more time, this is a presentation brought to you by Jicho La Kimbunga. This is a part of our program known as the Afrikan Survival Initiative. And what we plan to do ongoing every month, is bring to you content exactly what you just seen from our dear brother, Sam P.K. Collins. You did a great and excellent presentation, brother. And I'm sure everyone out there feels the same. But with no further ado, I want to navigate the conversation into our panel. Our panel discussion. We're going to come and talk about the presentation that the brother just did. And also, we're going to make some other points as well to kind of like lay more political education on top of this. Why is it important that we're doing this? First of all, it's because we need to be politically educated. Not only because there's an election coming next month, but we need to be politically educated every day of our lives. And if we are properly educated in terms of what the relationship is, for instance, between the U.S. government and black people, or the Jamaican government and black people, or the Nigerian government and black people, it doesn't matter, because black people are living under governments that we don't necessarily control. And we're being oppressed by these governments, by these policies, and by these practices. So there's no endorsement to the election cycle, but we need to be able to perform better. And I think that's what Brother Sam was saying at the very end. We're examining U.S. versus black people. Later on, we're going to have to come back and examine black people versus U.S. governments and lay it out, because our people have always resisted, and we always have been able to make these analyses, regardless of what time it's been in. We've had black minds, black scientists, people who understand politics, history, culture, was fully aware and woke. Whether you go back centuries and centuries, you'll find those revolutionary figures and those aspects of our culture there. And so again, this is Jicho La Kimbunga. We're right here on Kimbunga Media. For those who don't know, Kimbunga means whirlwind, and Jicho La Kimbunga means the eye of the whirlwind. And that is who we are as a brotherhood. I like to begin to bring out the panelists one at a time, and then we can definitely get, hey, Sam PK, what's up, man? So you staying back for the panel, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm staying back. We're gonna reason. Definitely, I want to hear what the Bobbers got to say.
Hey man, look, man, great presentation, great presentation, man.
Sante.
PG.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Oh, I'm in James. Sam, I was impressed with the presentation. And so, not to be picky, it was not only on target, it kind of showed the landscape. So when you talk about the economics of the Bush era, and then you talk about the policies, what we should also recognize is that those policies are ingrained into the American system. It was built for welfare, not to give you welfare and assistance. Welfare was built to make you dependent. So moving forward, all of their philosophical beliefs was to do the exact same thing. So whatever they tried to, whenever they covered it in, what's a good word for that? Whatever they covered it in, they were still giving you the same old stuff. I'm gonna be polite with my wording. They're giving you the same old stuff. just different packaged. They just packaged it different. And then when the banks fell, it was actually the savings and loans, which were funding the housing industry, started under the Bush administration, allegedly cleaned up under the Obama administration. What they did was stabilize the banking system. They didn't give two crap about the people that were suffering. Because, see, the banking was much more important to stabilize. Now, fortunately, since you said you was a youngster in those particular time periods, and the beauty of sharing your insight is because in living it, I was absolutely able to recognize how the system was playing us. And it was attempting, or let me say, attempting to play us categorically. We still have to function in this system. So what we have to do is get smart enough to use it to our benefit in order for us to do what the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey said, which was to build a unified African nation on the continent of Africa. Because we got to change the mindsets of our people. And our people look at these institutions. They look at the banking institution. They look at the political machinery and say, well, we got to copy that. No, we have to develop our own political machinery, put together our own Ujamaa system of government. And that's what we've got to do. Yeah.
Absolutely, brother. We also joined here by Baba Senghor Baye, our first Assistant President General, UNI ACLRC 2020. What's up, Baba?
Yeah, greetings, man. Sam, excellent historical presentation. And as the PG just said, it brought back so many memories of how hoodwinked we have been. From one administration, whether it's been the reptilians or whether it's been the Democrats, we've been hoodwinked. So much symbol of black faces in high places with no substance. That's what I like the most about how you made it plain. You kept it simple, as Malcolm said, so that we understand and understand why the U.S. government has always been the American KKK against black people. I would hope that as people listen to this presentation, as I will continue to listen to it, because even though I lived through all of what you shared, it reminded me of some of the things that I was even asleep on during the time of it happening. And I say that as a conscious brother, and I've been an anti-political establishment brother even before the time that you started with. However, they're so slick, Yurugu is so slick that they have a way of not only using us, but using token things that they tend to say they're giving you, when most of the time when they're giving you, they're taking back more than what they think they're giving you. Exactly. And that's super important for black people. And I hope all black people listen to it more than one time, the presentation, because obviously you did extensive research. Obviously you connected things that were so important. And so often people think about, well, this president was better than that president, or this president was better than that president, or this party was better than that party. Ain't none of them come forward with the kind of self-determination black people need, or even any kind of positive handout. Because as I say, as they give to you, they actually are taken away from you. And in the divisiveness amongst us as a race of people, by those people that get into high places that have black faces, that do the same thing as Yurugu does to you, creates a situation where it beats down on the critical mass to think that we don't have an option to do for ourselves.
If we take this history, Brother Khalil put in the chat the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So let's drop back, if we can, just to come forward. Go back to the era, and I got you back to the era of civil rights and what they believe was trying to make change, and how they saw America moving, realizing that from our forced incarceration to the first time 1865, we still suffer from the misgivings that America is going to be fair and just across the board for us.
So as Malcolm said, you got no human right, you got no civil rights until you got human rights. If they're not gonna give you human rights, forget what they're talking about is civil, because it ain't civil. Right. But anyway, I'll stop right there.
Right, Ashe. So we also got Brother IG from the Harlem Liberation School as well here with us. Greetings, Baba. How you doing? Welcome.
Peace and black power to the family. First, I want to thank The Brotherhood, I want to thank all the people who are watching and hopefully taking notes and listening and sharing. And I certainly want to thank Brother Sam for a very informative and thorough presentation. The only thing I would add, man, I've been thinking this and trying to say it for decades, is that once we realize that white folk took our people from our motherland, killed and raped our people, exploited our labor, had us hating on ourselves, hating our phenotype and our features, and doing all types of murderous things to us. Anything, therefore, is possible with them. Nothing they do that is illegal or immoral or unethical should surprise Africans and New Africans in the least. All it is further confirmation that we exist in an adversarial relationship. And that said, those of us who plan to stay within the borders of the United States had better be very comfortable and accept the fact that you're going to have to fight. We're going to have to fight, keep agitating, keep organizing and politically educating ourselves, build independent institutions, organizations, initiatives, form strategic alliances. And it means that we're going to have to stay in our organizational frameworks, our ideological frameworks, but we're going to have to be able to form key alliances. And that means that we're going to have to be able to understand where other Africans and New Africans are coming from and forge alliances. We don't have to agree on every single point, but we're going to have to, if those of us who stay here, those of us who are planning on leaving, that's a whole nother show, another broadcast. But it's really going back to what the Honorable Marcus Garvey was saying, to some degree, Elijah Muhammad was saying, Brother Malcolm was saying, that we really have to be thinking about there is no utopia here. There is no Shangri-La. There's no magic bullet here, man. We're going to have to fight. And so we're going to be here, whether it's in the voting booth, which is not my particular preference, whether it's in the streets, radical journalism, radical scholarship, building these independent African-centered organizations. We have to fight. If we're going to be here, we're going to always have to fight.
And I
so
think
we have to really galvanize our people to that reality.
And I think you fight on every level. I think you fight from the ballot box to the street. I think you fight on the universities. You fight in the schools. Brother Sam spoke brilliantly in reference to independent institutions and what caused the change with that, how they became redrafted with charter schools taken away with charter schools because the system changed on how you could get your children educated. But the reality is you still have to educate your children, even if you teach them at home. You have to make sure you implement and plant in them the concept of Garveyism, because as Sam says, it is a Garveyite analysis. I'm going to take it to a step to say it would be Marcus Garvey telling us, listen, this is what I told you in the 1900s. Did you listen? Because if you listened, then you need to apply it, because yes, all of us not going home, but you have to build the type of institutional and political structure that gives you what is needed here, because even on the continent of Africa, and Chief can speak to this as others, on the continent of Africa, the influence of the system that we're dealing with is there. And we have to get African leaders to realize that they have to develop an African government in an African mindset with African principles and values. Then we can control the economics of the system. And then when you control the economics, you therefore can become the power broker that you need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Peace, Baba Khalil. How you doing, Baba?
Hotep. Man, brother Sam, hey, man. That was beautiful, bro. That was beautiful. I forgot so much of that stuff. And during that time, I was so caught up into the drug game that I couldn't see it no way. You know, almost slid straight into the 3 strikes you're out, because I had 3 or 4 strikes, but they just didn't count them. So for the race. But, you know, I'm going to tell you that when you started dialoguing a lot of those statistics, it took me back to 1964, you know, the end of Jim Crow to the beginning of so-called civil rights, right? And what I thought about is during that period of time, or prior to that time, or during Jim Crow, we had the Green Book. Remember the history of the Green Book, right? All of those places, we had our own economic sources going on. But integration destroyed a lot of that, because now they was letting us come into their restaurants, so we didn't think that we needed ours. And I looked in, they got a new Green Book out now, and I looked in the old Green Book, and I'm out of Baltimore, so I seen 90% of where I grew up in the Green Book. Cars Beach, Pennsylvania Avenue clubs, all of that, right? And most of those things are closed down now. Yeah. You know, we don't have that unity in our communities. We don't even really have communities anymore. We have neighborhoods. You know, a lot of those, man, educational, and they were educational because they had our culture. You know, they were our culture. So they were educational. We don't even have that. That doesn't even exist in our neighborhoods anymore. You know, and the other piece to that, more than anything else, is you talked about that the 1980s introduction of that other drug thing that they layered our neighborhoods with, the crack. I also remember 1968. 1968. The week before Martin Luther King was assassinated, before they murdered him, in Baltimore, there was no drugs in the city. In fact, some of us had to walk to DC because that's where they said the drugs were. Serious, man. And the day after Martin Luther King was assassinated, everybody had a package.
Yep.
So where did it come from? Everybody, and we know the decimation of our community and the decimation of our people from that heroin age. Then they took it to the crack age because the heroin wasn't good enough to keep us crazy. That type of self-destructive behavior is what we're going through now. It's just so subtle that most of us can't even see it. Brother Sam, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate.
Excellent points, Robert Khalil. Those are excellent points, bro. Excellent points you just raised.
So, now, Sam, we know you don't remember that time, so you might want to write that down.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking mental notes.
So, hey, welcome everybody to the panel, man. Salutes everybody once again. We have some table topics that we wanted to go through and just kind of elaborate on. And the first one, I believe we already kind of touched on a little bit, guys, because the first one is dealing with the Reagan administration, the policies, and just who is Ronald Reagan in all of this? You know, because it's almost like a torch was passed through Reagan to the first Bush, and then Clinton took off, you know? And so let's examine the buildup, since we got the Babas here with us who lived through it and had their own political understanding of, you know, this guy, Ronald Reagan, who was the same one who was the governor for California and disarmed the Panthers. The same dude that was down with COINTELPRO and was shaking up LA and shaking up Oakland behind Black liberation. He ended up becoming the president later on, from a Hollywood actor to a president. Sound like somebody else who, you know, got very, very popular in Hollywood, in the Black community, as a favorite person to see on the screen, and then came as a Republican, you know, demagogue as well. So that's the topic of discussion for now. Let's talk about how the Reagan years and just that era, that 60s, 70s, and 80s transitioned into the Clinton era for those of us who can't go back that far.
Right. Ronald Reagan, going back, now governor actor, was not just Republican, he was anti-Black. Okay. And we knew that from the door. So his policies in California, as you've already described, addressed everything and anything that was Black in a very negative way. And he moved on Black people. That was kind of like his fundamental piece. But he also had an economic policy, which is called the trickle-down effect. Understand, if I got a big glass, I let trickle down. So everybody underneath me with another big glass, the big glasses keep getting full and the little glasses never get a drop. So his economic plan was intended to help those who already had. That's how he moved it forward. He also didn't move. He also never attempted to move forward on any particular racial issue. He did try to do something on a global scale, but that did not benefit people of African descent. He did nothing for us here in the States except put more drugs in our community, take advantage of the political economical situation that we were in, realizing that he could exploit that because, again, he was not about black people. He was about white people and put rich white people on the preference. Ronald Reagan's administration laid the foundation for everything that happened after that because it was built on trying to make sure that he controlled particularly people of African descent, men and women, and made sure that there was no progress, which is when my brother said, how did George get into the street? They was already coming before Martin Luther King got killed.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. PG, Baba Senghor, what you got to say about that, man?
Man, you know, it's so depressing when you look back and you see all of this crazy stuff that went down because like I'm gonna come back to what I said. We was hoodwinked. You know, and yes, he set the precedent, but even before those that came before him, he was only continuing on to do the blistering of the black community. And then we thought that when we got rid of him, once again, when he was gone, everybody thought, okay, he's gone. Now we got a new day, we got a new way, and blah. All of that was fake. And I mean, I'm not going to try to go too much deeper into it, just to say it's the same game. It's just they play it differently depending on what black people they can lull to sleep and put in power to come at us. And then when you step into the bush, I mean, you know, that was even more saddening to the black community. So then when you got Clinton, and I like the way Sam put it, you know, the saxophone playing white boy who they say was a black man anyway. That's what the black people in the street was talking about. Oh, we got Clinton, so everything gonna be better now. So I'm not gonna go too deep into it. I'm just gonna say straight up, it's the same game. You just go from the reptilian to the democrat. And the saddest part for me is how our people get lulled to sleep and play this game of going from one party. I've heard people say, well, oh yeah, the Republicans can't win because they've been in long enough. We're going to get the Democrats and we're going to be all right. Absolutely wrong. Neither of those parties have anything laid out to help raise up black people. Neither one. I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm not going to go too technical, you know, because Baba Akili kind of laid it all out. And the way Sam made the presentation, you go from one jackanate to another jackanate to another jackanate with all the same agenda. And that is to keep the critical indigenous mass asleep, pull a few up, put them out there, whether or not it's through Hollywood or whether or not it's through politics, and make them stay asleep. And that's what burns me up the most, because we need to be critical thinkers. Garvey said, once they enslave this, it ain't no problem enslaving everything else of you. So they might take the shackles off your hands and put them on your brains. You're done. You're done, because you actually become danger to yourself when you don't know who you are. And that's what we've been faced with. So, you know, like I say, the politics is all game. We need to be focused on how we can be determined to build for ourselves and not be hoodwinked. And I think if people really look at this piece that Sam laid out, listen to what we're saying, people need to really, really wake up and understand, ain't no savior coming in America. It just ain't happening.
Yeah. Baba IG, what you remember about those times, brother?
The Reagan years are very personal for me. I was a teen and young adult during that time. Coming up in Harlem, getting ready to go to college during part of that time. And what I remember distinctly at that age, you know, was that he significantly cut social programs. So the public library was closing earlier, and some days it wasn't open at all. So that the community centers I went to play ball or get mentorship or whatever closed down. They dried up. And see, when you do that, it affects housing. It affected schooling. It affected those little recreational spaces that we had. And that therefore led many of the young people, many of my friends, right into the streets. And once they went right into the streets, what was conveniently waiting for them? Crack
Right.
vials. I mean, you could walk on my block and blocks, and there's crack vials all over the sidewalk. You could be walking with your mother, and somebody said, "You want some jumbos? Want some crack?" It's like, what? No, all respect was gone. Brothers stopped playing ball. They were either selling drugs or using the drugs. Your boy's mother might come to you offering all types of sexual favors. It was really bad. People think that it's being exaggerated, but it was really bad times all over the country. And actually, if you watch the Wizard of Oz movie, it's broken down symbolically because the Wicked Witch of the West sent the people, the lion who lacked courage is the black man and woman. The person who thought he had no brain, the scarecrow, that's the black man and woman. And the person who was the other one?
Tin Man.
Was lost at home. That's the black man and woman. And who was the other one? Scarecrow? Okay, whatever.
The Tin Man.
Tin Man who had no heart, no sensitivity, a thug, a so-called hoodlum, right? She saw they were finally getting together. She saw them in the crystal ball, which is surveillance, and she sent them through what? The poppy fields, where they fell asleep. That's right in the movie.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did, what we're all talking about.
That's right.
So I remember those times. I remember good Africans, new Africans, sent to jail for nonviolent offenses. I remember people displaced saying, it's too wild here. People getting shot up. They leaving the block. Gentrification is becoming big now. A lot of landmarks disappearing slowly. So yeah, his economic policies, he's deregulating things just like Trump wants to do. So, these big businesses come and they want to destroy, they want to get, let's say, gas or oil, but the ways they're going to do it will poison the environment. So we have laws in place that regulate that. Well, these demons want to come in and deregulate so their boys can get paid, even though they know this is going to cause cancer and all these other things. So Reagan represents a lot of that to me. And he was also big on that law and order talk. And we also need to remember when he was the governor of California, that he was the one giving the press conference with the little white girls when the Black Panther Party was walking by, right? And he's the one that changed the gun law, because at that time you could walk with open weapons. So we need that relationship, and he's like one of the first presidents in the modern era who was really in bed with the big corporations. Yeah. If you go back to the 50s, you'll see him in all these commercials, picking up this corporation or that corporation, because he was a former B-rated actor. And he gave these corporations huge tax breaks and put all of those taxes on the burden of the working and the underclass. So I have a personal venom for him. I probably have it from all of them, but with him it was personal because at that time I remember very clearly my friends and family members that were directly affected by his policies.
Wow. That's great insight. Right away while you was talking, I was thinking about the role that Ronald Reagan played in the fight in Liberia. That right now they're talking about the coups that's been happening all over Africa, particularly West Africa, and how the West is upset about it. America is opposed to it. But in the case of the Liberia coup that took place against Tolbert, maybe Sam even can come on and elaborate more about it after we talked about Khalil. But from my understanding, it was Ronald Reagan who was behind a lot of that, and it even welcomed Sammy Doe as a politician. They accepted the coup. So yeah, man, this guy was a real crook. He was a real crook. For me, I remember like Reagan. I was born under Carter, so I remember Reagan as a real small boy. He was like the president when I first went to kindergarten and first grade and stuff like that. We thought he was just a normal president. We didn't have no idea, but yeah, he was really the one who was he was the pusher. He flooded the hood. you know, I want to give Baba Khalil as well opportunity to give us some insight, give us some of the memories, man. Like, you know, in context.
Well, Hotel. One of the things that come to me first more than anything else is Nixon, not so much Reagan. You know, Reagan, Death Valley days, cowboy. You know, you know, but I mean, we're talking about the continuum. What it reminds me of and brings me to is Mr. Fuller's United Independent Compensatory Code Systemic Concept. You know, the code. What it brings me to is understanding that Reagan in that era was there are 4 stages in racism, according to Mr. Fuller. You have the establishment of it, the maintenance of it, the expansion of it, and you have the refinement of it. And it puts me in the place of the refinement of the racism that we've been experiencing since they first kidnapped us and brought us in this country. You know, they established it quite well. We know that they actually established it with King Alexandria. They've been established it, but then they did the maintenance on it, and they did a lot of the maintenance probably with the Jim Crow era. A lot of the maintenance and it's reestablishing and refining it. I mean, maintenance of it. Then the expansion of it. That expansion of it was towards the end of the Jim Crow era, and now we're in this maintenance. And every single thing that we see now is maintaining something that they already put in place.
Yep.
Things that Nixon put in place, the things that Reagan put in place, the things that Johnson put in place, the things that Eisenhower, we can go back that far if we want to, you know. But what we're living in now is the maintenance. And if we don't know how to deconstruct this system, and not so much their system, but the system within our own minds and our own thinking, then we're doomed to repeat all this crap over again. So the idea is to make sure that we establish our own system, make sure that we consistently and continually educate ourselves so we can practice the self-love and the deconstruction of all of that psychotic mentality that we've been living through for the past however long that you can think back. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. You know, we're in the process of rehabilitating the UNIA ACL and Garveyism for our generation. And, you know, even this conversation is a part of that. So definitely appreciate all those perspectives. Now, we have 3 other topics to talk about, but we have about 25 minutes left. So what I want to do, instead of going through each topic one by one, I want to put the topics out there, and then we can just bomb rush the subjects. Also, I want to say, if anyone has any questions for any of the panelists out there, just put your questions in the comment section, and we can, you know, we can have some back and forth as well. So the next question or topic was on the politics of mass incarceration.
Whoa, Lord.
Flying, you know, the flashback to Clinton, and really just dealing about the impacts of mass incarceration, the politics of it, you know. Also, the imperialist policies, immigration crisis currently in the United States. A lot of people need to have a better understanding of how this came about as well. We can get some insight from the Babas that'll help us out, you know, at the local community levels, because a lot of people trying to figure out this information. Then we have, last but not least, FEMA. You know, we're dealing with hurricane seasons. We just had 2 horrible hurricanes hit the country, particularly our people down in the southeast. And we want to talk specifically about, you know, how do we finally put into place emergency response and that is self-determined by our people. We have to be able, there was word that people was being turned away who was trying to get the people in North Carolina. Still not clear or certain of the damage to Florida right now for the last Milton, I think it was. So we want to talk about these 3 different things: mass incarceration, the international policies, immigration crisis, as well as Hurricane Helene. Now we will be talking about international policies next time. and that'll be coming up on the 26th of this month. So in 2 weeks' time, we'll be coming to have our last roundtable before they vote. But we'll be doing the same conversation, and this time we'll be really touching on international policies, and really bringing it home. Our whole goal is to make sure that people out there, those who view this video, have more information, they have more knowledge in their brains, they have a better understanding, historical, political, before they go cast any vote or before they decide not to. We're nonpartisan, we're pro-Black, it's all about the people, and this is the most righteous way to really put the information out there. So those are the 3 topics. Sam, we ain't hear from you in a minute. Maybe you could start right there with the politics of mass incarceration, how everything led up to the politics, and then we can go person by person and just kind of close out.
No doubt. When it comes to mass incarceration, speaking as a DC resident, what I'll say is that that's a very crucial topic here, especially considering that DC is a bit more quote unquote progressive when it comes to mass people who have experienced incarceration. And let me just go back by saying that during the so-called Republican Revolution in DC, what Congress Newt Gingrich, they took away our prison. So every state has their own prison. And in DC, we're not a state, but we had Lorton, which is like right outside of DC and Virginia. So what happened was when the Republican Party had shut down Lorton, Black people in DC who get convicted in DC, they get spread throughout the federal prison system. So a lot of our brothers and sisters, they are put in Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, North Carolina without any contact from family members. People are very hard pressed to go visit them. And even in the prison system, DC people have a reputation that often attracts the worst elements of that system to them. So DC has a very important legacy as it relates to mass incarceration, and that legacy has manifested itself in the violence interruption program that once again is under scrutiny because of bribery allegations against Councilmember Trayon White, who allegedly accepted bribes to divert contracts that come out of that office. But I'm saying all of that because, even amid all of the crime, all of the violence taking over the city, this is probably the most violence that DC has seen since the early 2000s or even since the crack epidemic. And even with all of that, there are still calls to, dismantle violence interruption programs. Housing's not getting funded like it should be. A lot of quality of life issues that were caused by mass incarceration. The administration in DC just has shown no interest in tackling that. All they want to do is fund police. And the police received the funding that the mayor had proposed for them. And the mayor didn't even propose a similar amount of funding for other programs, which goes to show you, their priorities. And one last point before I wrap up. Post-pandemic, a lot happened across the country, a lot of crime, a lot of kids running around in the streets, and a lot of calls to take those kids out, snuff them out, incarcerate them, lock them up. But one thing that people overlook is that these young people are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those of us who went into the prison system during the 1990s. So we're talking about families that are just all out of whack, kids raising kids, grandmas as the primary caretakers, just no sense of community left. And gentrification exacerbated that. The charter school movement exacerbated that as well. Neighborhood schools are no longer neighborhood schools. Kids in DC are traveling across the city to go to school. They're going through like 3-4 hoods, and they're getting into it with just any and everybody. So the legacy continues. And all the while, we got Black drivers who are throwing our people under the bus. So we got to come up under this. And I'll stop this by just saying that, we as Garveyites, we got to pour more. Not saying we are not, but we got to be more hard pressed to build institutions, which is why I'm very, very pleased to hear about, Mali, I'm very pleased to hear about that, because the institutions, that's our lifeline. You know, once you build institutions first and you build the economics, the politics will follow, because from there you will have political influence. You know, so I think I'll stop there. I did cover a lot of points. You know, Sante.
All right. Thank you, brother. Hopefully y'all can still hear me. I cut my camera off. I lost my lights, but I'm still on.
We hear you.
All right. All right. So the next, we were talking about imperialist policies, immigration crisis. If anybody want to touch on the politics of mass incarceration, feel free. But we'll move forward to imperialist policies. Basically, we had a conversation about immigration, and I believe it was Baba PG Achille or Brother IG that brought up that you know, a lot of the people who are coming into the United States as immigrants are actually fleeing countries that are being negatively impacted by U.S. policies. That it's the imperialist policies of the United States government that's actually driving the immigration quote unquote crisis. And you know, can we touch on that a little bit as well while we still have some time?
Yeah, while we have time, I'm going to two things. I'll start there, but I also want to address mass incarceration. It is truly the imperialistic policies of this nation that has impacted other countries, which is why people are moving and walking across countries to get to a place where they believe they have a better opportunity. And I say it where they believe they have one. And therefore, in that action, they have now become a symbol of negativity, because the quote unquote system is saying, okay, you are overwhelming me, and I now need to try to slow you down. I need to push you to a whole different realm. And so therefore we tailor you and call you different. Now, it wasn't a problem with that immigration when you was filling those jobs that nobody wanted. See, they didn't take nobody's jobs. They did the jobs that didn't nobody else want to do. And they did those jobs in order to make that happen. So one of the things that we have to look at, even as it relates to mass incarceration, because what we don't want is the immigration issue to become another incarceration issue, which becomes another industry issue where other folks are benefiting from your incarceration. That's what we don't want. See, so we have to be, in speaking truth to power, understanding that mass incarceration did exactly that. It put other people to work. They built other industries that other people got jobs from, because what we were doing was going to jail. I mean, we went to jail for a vial of crack, and you got 5 years, and yet you could have a pound of cocaine and get 5 days. See, so it's all economically planned out on how they use us and how they put us in situations to where we have to recognize. One of the things that Brother Sam brought up about neighborhood schools. Well, no, it's no longer neighborhood school, not even Philadelphia. You can have a school 2 blocks from you, but you got to get on a bus to go to school. Makes no sense. However, track the dollar. Track where the economic goes. Track, and always is not the dollar. I use the word dollar as symbolic, but track how the money flows. Track where the gold stands. Since the paper dollar is no longer backed by gold, it's just paper. So let's track how the economic flows, and then that speaks to it. One of the things we also have to recognize is that even now, where they call themselves addressing mass incarceration because they incarcerated people at teenage years for life, and realize that you can't make a life at 13 years old because consciously he wasn't even of an adult stage to understand his actions. However, we have a responsibility of conscious Black men to do what the Marcus Messiah Garvey put for us to do, which was to build the fundamental nation, build a family and a community that can function based on its own economic engine. Because when we have our own economic engine and we're not dependent on the engine that even we are surrounded by, because those of us that stay here still going to be dealing with this economics, we have to make sure we address the economic engine, make sure we address the political reality, recognizing that we can no longer be the cannon fire or the footstool for them to put their feet up on and rest. No, we're going to stand up and we're going to take control of our own destiny, and we will put these things in place. And yes, we have to have these kind of conversations so that whoever hears it understands that people are thinking and people are working in order to build that economic system and that political system to counteract this political reality that we face.
Yep.
Regarding the mass incarceration, I'm sorry, you go ahead, my brother.
No, I'm not going to be long, man. I just want to remind people the prisons were built to put us in it. The history of Philadelphia, you know, I don't want to go all into it, but prisons were put up to put us in prison.
Yeah.
And then what happened in the privatization of prisons, as the President General just said, the whole economic piece came into play. So it profitized Urugu and corporations as they incarcerated us. So when people talk about the pipeline from school to prison, that's very real. That was a strategic plan to incarcerate us. Then when crack came into existence, as the President General just said, the disparities in cocaine versus crack. And if you look at the record, so many black people, and not just black men, black women, black mothers, babies came out addicted to crack. So I'm saying this was a organized plan. And then I never want to forget our political prisoners, because I think Sam one time said it, not tonight, but one time he said that these are the brothers and sisters, particularly the brothers who fought for our sovereignty and freedom, that were incarcerated. I could mention Jamil Al-Amin. I could mention Mumi Abu Jamal. It's so many people that we could mention that have done 30 and 40 years in prison. It has destroyed their lives. It destroyed their families. It's a complete destruction. And so it's a plan. So when we talk about slavery and don't talk about mental slavery today that exists, and the disparities in the incarceration of our people, we're missing the boat, because most of us still got chains on our brains out here. So we in prison out here. And then when we get physically incarcerated, we know that a lot of brothers go through self-rehabilitation and they become some of the most powerful warriors and leaders of all time. Marcus Garvey was imprisoned. Malcolm X was imprisoned. Martin Luther King. We go down the line. So it ain't too many black men that escape being incarcerated. The sad thing is most of them are innocent. It's been proven that Mumi Abu Jamal was innocent. It's been proven that Jamil Al-Amin was innocent. The people who supposedly committed the crimes that they doing time for came forward. So we're dealing with a corrupt system that's planned to incarcerate us and to put us in prison and to make profit off of us. If that's not monopoly capitalism, what is it? And of course, we could talk about the immigration thing. That's very important too, because they are our people. And as you all say, most of the people that come here are escaping oppression from governments that have been down-pressed by the West. So it is very important to recognize it. And sometimes brothers and sisters out here forget all about our brothers who've been in lockdown. We can't do that. We cannot do that, because the minds of a lot of black men. In fact, I bet you I could scan on this line right here of many of us that have been incarcerated at one time. So black men have always been under attack, and now black women. The prison population of African women, mothers, is increasing in North America, of black people. So that's a very serious topic. We could do a whole thing on that. But it's very important for us to recognize it was all planned. And one thing I want to add, we forgot to mention, the angel dust era.
Ooh.
You see, because the angel dust era was an era that preceded the crack era. And for those who don't know about angel dust can be pharmaceutically produced with partially elephant, pills, etc. And there were police in this country that were busted for incubating and making angel dust. It's said that the reason they call it angel dust is because the Hells Angels transported angel dust across the country. So we got to think about that, because what angel dust did to your brain, and I know many of us that come back from the 60s, we kind of understand this clearly, it wiped out the little bit of thinking that you had. And you became animalistic. Angel dust was a beast to our community. And a lot of brothers thought they could take on police. When they smoked some dust, they thought they could whip the police, y'all. And so consequently, you got a lot of charges. You got charges with assaulting the police. Then came the crack era. So all of this stuff was manufactured. But I want to make it clear, they didn't have to bring no drugs in the country to make angel dust. Angel dust was a pharmaceutically produced drug here in the US. And most drugs that come in the country are pharmaceutically engineered beyond what they are, like, for example, cocaine, to make crack. So we need to understand that it's a plan. It's a plan that Urugu has had to incarcerate black people, to lock us down. And how many white boys that got busted, the President General mentioned it, with pounds of cocaine? that didn't do no time.
That's right.
No time. So anyway, I'm gonna stop there because it's amazing because of the people that we've lost from drugs, the mothers that have had babies haven't been able to just broke up the family. And somebody mentioned earlier about the neighborhood versus community. We have gotten completely away from community, completely away from that whole concept of community when that's our culture. Without community, we don't have cultural framework. Anyway, I'll stop right there, because I know other brothers got a lot to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you for that, Baba. I was going to say, when I think of mass incarceration, my mind goes to Bill Clinton because of that 1994 crime bill, which really was a continuation of the 1990 crime bill before him. But what made his insidious is that his crime bill had it so that if a person lived in public housing projects, and they got caught with drugs, they evicted their whole family.
Yep.
And took their property, which does what? It pushes people into the street. And you know what's in the street? The drug game. But way before that, a sister named Michelle Alexander wrote a book called The New Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And she's talking about the 13th Amendment. But way before her, there was a queen mother, a sister named, she's an ancestor now, named Sharshi McIntyre.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote a book called Criminalizing the Race in like 1983. And she really is the first one that I remember talking about the 13th Amendment. So if we're talking about mass incarceration, you got to go back to the 13th Amendment, because that's the amendment in which they said slavery was illegal, and then they gave you a new form of slavery. And then what they did was simply made a million different laws that black people could break so they could throw us in jail. If you didn't have a vagrant pass, if you didn't have a job, if you didn't have all these different things, they throw you in jail. And I think they're doing the same thing today.
Yeah, black code.
Excellent points, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Baba Khalil.
Yeah, mine is probably not as political, but more political, personal. Coming up in that era, and I always emphasize the heroin era because that was an initiation period. That was an initiation period. And most of the people that I know that went in the prison system went into prison based on the heroin era, and some of them are just getting out. Some of them are literally just getting out from the 3 strikes you're out. Some of them. I'm a mental health professional. I met with a brother last week who is 71. He just got out in August. Over pretty much 40 years of his life, he's been in the penitentiary. And we know that we talk about one person, but when we talk about one person, we're generalizing across the board. Okay. This particular brother, I mean, intelligent as hell, but he wasn't educating himself the way that we are, so he don't have any real information on survival and what's being done. So he's still practicing self-destructive behavior, which is what this system is geared to do with their miseducational system. And that's that mass incarceration, except for people like Malcolm, people like Martin, people like Musa Elijah Muhammad, people like Noble Drew Ali, all those brothers that went back and forth into the jails, but not necessarily back and forth, but went into the jails and found themselves and made movements and educated themselves. He's not one of them. And most of our brothers are not. They get caught up in the survival system of the mentality of the jail. And all they know is how to survive. They have no idea on how to live. In Baltimore, an example of maybe 134 of us in maybe a mile radius that we would meet together regularly as teens. Only 5 of us are left. 5 of us are left. Over half of them died in the institutions or died on the way to the institution using one of them chemicals that we talked about.
Right.
The 3 to 5 that are left, I'm working. Most of them too unhealthy to do any kind of work. So the system has depleted us of all the energy that we have to support and help our people and our families. So the mass incarceration, and then when you think about mass incarceration, you had DC, which everybody went federal. Everybody went federal because is the federal state or federal laws. Maryland, everybody went into the state systems. Maryland is the only state in the country that the penitentiary is inside the city. And the city still didn't benefit from the resources.
Wow. That lets you know. Slavery by another name. That's what they call it.
Absolutely.
Slavery by another name. I believe Brother Shakarai, he has a question for the panel. Shakarai?
Yes, give thanks, Chief. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, cool. Just making sure. The question, first of all, giving thanks to Brother Sam PK, giving thanks to the brothers who are, sharing this vital, to draw from Baba Khalil's phrase, the personal political sharing that is taking place at the moment. It's very. I kind of want to continue it with my question. In relation to domestic policy, and shift the focus from the national to the local, and ask you all how much have you been following the local political scene, and what would be your reflections, based upon wherever you are, because we know that different states and different cities have different dynamics. And so what would you advise, or what would you say? What is your assessment of the political scene as far as where you are locally and its relationship to African people?
Well, since I'm in DC, let me real quick say we're in bad shape on a local level in terms of politics, and I understand how important it is for people to actually think about voting local. But what's happened here in DC is we have a Ward 8 council person that's under federal attack. And the reason I said I wanted to go first, because we the colony. We the colony. We ain't no state. We taxation without representation for real. But the point I'm making is the politicians here in the District of Columbia, first of all, ain't no chocolate city no longer. So, when you start talking about politics locally, it ain't all black faces like it used to be during the Marion Barry days. But anyway, this young brother was trained by Marion Barry, and he's under serious attack. Sam kind of mentioned it earlier. That's very serious here, because I see most politicians, including our own, folks that get into politics, as becoming expert. They try to be white collar criminals, like the white boys. You know what I'm saying? And they get caught. And so, unfortunately, he might have been set up, but he actually went for it, and they trying to pull him down. He's still running this term. And the only other person that could be on the ballot is a Republican, that other people that want to run have to be write-ins because they miss the primaries. So if he wins, he can still be removed from his position, and he probably will win, because this is like his third term, and he's popular in Southeast. But the other council can remove him, which is no longer majority black, the city council. So what I would say, people with local politics, be mindful of black faces in high places that may be skin folk but ain't kin folk, and ain't gonna follow through with doing a darn thing for you. In fact, they're doing everything they can for themselves. And then in Montgomery County, in PG County, both of the candidates running, both the Republican and the Democrat, have been called up on criminal things that they've done in the past involving money. One, the incumbent putting money into his own private business. The sister running against him, yes, she's a sister running against him, has now been caught up on some properties, things that she did in DC, and she didn't pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So they actually, one is going to win, if you hear what I'm saying. So we need to look at this local level political thing very carefully, because remember, from the school board on up is positions of power locally. I don't want to get into New York too much. I know Philadelphia could probably tell a story. We all could, Baltimore, everybody could tell a story. But Baltimore is heavily affected by the last thing I said when I talked about Maryland and PG, because the leader of Baltimore has endorsed the sister. So anyway, these are black faces in high places that are getting picked off left and right for criminal offenses. And the white folks are doing the same thing. So I would say local politics are very important in this election, going across the country, but be careful and remember, all politicians in my book are crooks, all of them.
I could actually start where you stopped at. That's the reality there. I live in DC. I pay taxes in DC. They have the young guy in Baltimore, man. That I think I actually have been watching him, and I think he's for the people, even though I don't trust none of them. I don't trust none of them. And the work that he is doing, man. He partnered with that Westmore guy. So the mayor and the governor, they're dealing with a lot of the housing stuff, right? And I think that's extremely important, going back to the dollar housing and all of that. But I'm gonna tell you, personally, politically, I don't give a shit about none of them. Because I don't trust them. I've been on the planet too long and watching, and I'm not saying there's not one out there that's good.
Right.
But I happen to know that the only difference between a Republican and a Democrat is a name. That's all. Because they all come from the same animal. So, and I'm not telling you I won't vote. I'll vote on an issue and an issue that I believe in, but I don't stand by the vote because I don't trust them. I don't trust the whole political system. The whole system that we're under, being oppressed and abused, is their system. So I can't trust it.
I say. Yeah. Anybody else want to handle that question?
Well, politics locally in Philly is, I guess I can say it's interesting. Our last election, we just elected a sister as the mayor for the city of Philadelphia. She has a very strong agenda focusing on neighborhoods, focusing on community engagement, focusing on, of course, reducing crime. But when I look at politics and I look at the world we live in, we have to make sure we use politics to benefit us. We have to work it. It's a system that we're not going to get away from. Whether you're here, whether you like it or not, you're here. It's going to impact your life one way or another. Mm-hmm. And if we don't attempt to manipulate it, if we don't attempt to at least understand it, then we're just giving in. And I'm not for giving in at any time. I'm a warrior. I go to war every day. So in saying that, I'm going to deal with the political system to try to make it work best for us, the people. I try to make sure that we educate people to even the things that go on the ballot, because strangely enough, it's not just the people that you elect. You kind of vote in the things that kind of kick you in the butt, because you don't read what's on the ballot. You don't read the little things that say, hey, we're going to raise your taxes because we want to do X, Y, Z. You don't read it. You just say, okay, yeah, and you vote for it. No, we have to change how we function within this system. I mean, educationally, politically, is going to be crucially important. We must be politically educated to utilize this system in any way we possibly can. However, we also have to recognize there are folks that are running for office and they have their own agenda. We happen to have some of our council people here, one, educated in independent Black schools. So we put some Kwanzaa, some consciousness, some Ingus Asaba into city council. See, so that won't change everything going out, but it's going to make a difference, particularly where he can, because we now have an ear that we can put stuff in and say, hey, remember your roots. Matter of fact, when your instructor stands up and say, yeah, I taught you in class, you kind of listen a little bit different. See, so I believe in using this political system. I understand what it is. It's the animal that has been built to not only incarcerate us and imprison us, but to keep us in a state where we keep everybody else okay. We have to build our own political system in order to do that. It was mentioned earlier that UNIA ACRC 2020 is to rehabilitate the UNIA actually to rehabilitate the race. And that means to put Garvey's mission in motion again. We want to rehabilitate the race, take all of the knowledge that we have, that we put together and understanding. It's all of the things that were explained to us today and say, okay, how do we use this to move us forward? Because they damn sure work hard to keep us where we are and push us backwards.
No, that's right.
These rules are they play this game awful well. We have to be better at it because we have to change it.
Okay, brother RJ. Brother RJ, I'm not bucking in, Chief, but brother RJ, what about the Big Apple?
Oh man, Big Apple's rotten to the core, man. As y'all know, we all a big colony in this country. Y'all know that. Let me say this, man. As you know, unless you've been living under a rock, P. Diddy's in some trouble.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I'm glad you
Right?
went there.
And guess what? Mayor Eric Adams is in some trouble. They done took his phones, laptop, all of that. People resigning from the mayoral administration, cabinet, whatever. So it's a funny thing in New York. It's like there's an attack on what is presumably powerful black men.
Yeah.
And it so happens that these powerful black men are crooked as all get out, and corrupt as all get out, and bestial as all get out, so they give them bullets. But do be clear that whatever they accused of doing or did do, we could probably find some white folk that make them look like Girl and Boy Scouts. So we know that there's kind of a dual thing going on with that, attacking, and he's a Democrat. I think there's a lot more to what's going on with the mayor. I think that well, that's one thing. The other thing is that a lot of our people are not politically literate. They may be literate, but not politically literate. So they may not be familiar with a ballot. They may not be familiar. They got to look at both sides. They got to mark it a certain way. I think that there are concerns that there will be violence at some polls. Not so much in New York City, but definitely I think in down south and Midwest. But there's a lot of concerns because some of these white folk are talking about, we strapping up and it's like real talk and real reckless. But I think that in New York, as in your cities, that we have to go backwards to go forwards. And that includes Honorable Marcus Garvey, that includes Republican New Africa, that includes the Revolutionary Action Movement, that includes Black Panther Party. We need a sovereign nation. And as we're working on that, we need to have a national independent Black party. We should have our own party. We should be raising our own issues, running our own candidates, and vetting them. So I'm always going to push for that. I'm with all of the brothers on that. I think we all agree on that. That's the ultimate answer. And even if we can't, as we're working on that long range goal, PG, you're right and exact. We need to be working the system as best we can. Revolutionaries use whatever tool is available. If you got a knife, you're going to go at the enemy with your knife and fork, and then you're going to take his M1916 and use that. So I think we have to get back to that type of thinking. I think we need to read Kwame Nkrumah and Neocolonialism, and Last Stage of Imperialism, and know that a lot of these people, as the Bibles have already stated, are put in position. They look like us, and they may dress and sound like us, but they are neo-colonial leaders. That is to say that they work deliberately and intentionally for our enemies, and they are put there to pacify us. So we have to be clear on that too. That just don't vote on color alone. We need to know people's politics.
That's fair.
And that's all I would say, man. I think y'all said it all better than me.
We said it, all of us, and saying it together, we said it well.
Oh yeah. Independent Black political power is what we have to. Absolutely. Without that, we just talking shit. But we need that. We need some power.
I want to add one last thing, and I don't want to get us banned, but armed insurrection ain't off the table, black man and woman.
No,
it ain't off the table.
No.
It's never off the table.
It can't be off the table.
We gotta bring that back. I don't hear that enough in our community. We used to talk that all the time. Now you don't hear that. That's why we need to vote. That's not off the table. That's how America got America.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right or wrong.
Right. Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So
P. Diddy was talking about an independent Black political party too. I see the video with him talking about that.
P. Diddy got caught up though. P. Diddy got caught up, but Brother IG, you're right. You don't take anything off the table because that's how you have to understand how this system was built. That was on the table. That's how it got built. So anything we have to do is understand that whatever tool that we can use, we have to keep all those tools in our toolkit.
That's
by
right.
any means
Keep
necessary.
everything in our
And,
toolkit.
and,
The only
and,
thing that's,
and
the
don't
only thing that's
always
off the table is dying. I ain't dying.
and don't always talk about it in public.
Absolutely. That's right. You can't. Those are conversations that are quietly held, but preparation is everything. So for all of those who may be listening, preparation for what may come, I'm going to say it this way. At this point in time in 2024, come November, you will know whether or not you need to strap up and get on the street, or you can continue to function the way you do. Because at the end of the day, blood going to flow on America's streets if the other shit go.
Oh, it's already flowing,
For
bro.
real.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about flowing. Because
No,
see,
I
if that,
got you.
other,
It's
if
gonna
that
flow more.
orange head, if he steps in, them white folks trying to make America white again. It keeps saying it. They keep telling you. You say, make it great again. Okay, my question is, when the hell was it ever great? You can't be great again if you weren't great.
To them. To
And they're
them, it's great.
openly saying this. When I say all this, I want you to be clear. Newscast after newscast, these white militias are openly saying
Yes.
that we're going to go to these polls with they got the guns while they're talking on them.
All right. See,
Right?
so
That's what they're saying. So we need to be discreet, Baba Khalil. I submit to that wisdom. That's absolutely right and exact. We also have to put a word, at least get that word out to the people that we need to match that force. We absolutely
like you
match
say, it ain't
that
off
force.
the table, brother. Survival
Yeah,
of the fittest, man. It's not off the table.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Asante Sana brothers.
Shaka Ra,
Yeah.
I hope we handled that. I hope we handled that well. You heard from Philadelphia, New York, DC, and Baltimore.
Giving facts was much appreciated. Much appreciated.
Yeah, man. So we're not out of time, but we've exhausted our conversation. I do. Yeah, it was a great, powerful second symposium. Shout out to all of y'all, man, and everybody, all the viewers out there. Definitely want to pay homage to the ancestors who guided us to this point and on whose shoulders we stand. This is the real work. It may seem like we're just having a conversation, but we're going to spark the thinking that's necessary for our people to take action. And if we're not having these conversations, then we're not giving the people the thoughts that they need to really build on. So
that's right. Absolutely, Chief.
I salute you all.
Chief, can you repeat the information about that? You're raising money. We're raising money. Could you repeat that information so people can?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So it's the Mali Center. The Basani organization, the Black Star Action Network International, we've been active here in Sierra Leone for the last 12 years, but we have never established ourselves in a single location. And we didn't establish like a mass program. We was doing a lot of partnership projects, a lot of, I guess, experimental projects, trying to see exactly what we could do out here, learning along the way. But over the last year, we've really been working with the Pan-African community here more strongly, and we have been able to build a consensus about what's necessarily needed here to capacitate the whole movement. So there's thousands of Pan-Africans here, but there's no center. There's no central location where we can get on the same vibe psychologically. There's nowhere where we can go and get the same, course of African philosophy, so to speak. And so after the Drums of Mosai event that we had on Garvey Day out here, it was just decided that, okay, it's time for us to really, from August to January, to really push to open up this center. And so we've been able to partner with one of our friends here, a brother named Father Elijah Gegra. Father Elijah is the CEO for Culture Radio 104.5 FM here in Freetown. It's probably the most conscious. It is the most conscious African-centered radio station probably in the country. And this brother is from the diaspora. He's from here, but he went out and he came back. And coming back, this is where he established a community radio station. And so our office, we just was able to rent today. With the donations that have been sent over the last 6 weeks, we was able to raise $555 and able to use 500 of that to secure a lease for an office inside of this Culture Radio complex. So now we have access to the facilities of the whole compound, which is a multi-purpose room. We have our own private office. There's a swimming pool there. There's a conference room there. There's even a hotel for people traveling. There's a small club for events. And then there's also a tennis court, you know, just for a little recreation. So all of these come along with the location that we've been able to rent. It's the office that we rented, but we also have access to the full facilities. And it's come from the relationship between the UNIACL, Basani, and the Rastafarian community here in Sierra Leone. We've been able to merge and say, okay, let's do this together. And so the form of education that we want to really push through the Messiah Academy Leadership Institute, we call it Mali, is basic, fundamental Pan-African education. It'll deal with some literature, but more than likely we'll be doing a lot of video presentations, a lot of public roundtable discussions. We'll also be doing some STEM, some science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programming as well. We still plan to also do leadership training, which will be more of organizational training, bringing people in from the community to learn the basics of how to organize to resolve issues themselves, really just to give people some tools to use as we pursue self-determination. And so, again, we will be preaching and teaching Pan-Africanism from a Garveyite perspective. 2, we also will be arming the people with the actual grassroots organizational skills that is needed in order for them to develop better quality leaders for their own communities that have the Pan-African consciousness. For me and for us, we see this as our best way to be effective in transferring the knowledge that we have over to the minds of the people here who really have the greatest responsibility to transform their own leadership. We deal with the same corruption here as well. Black man, black woman, we have to stop being corrupt in the way that we deal with power. We have to respect power, and we have to come correct or just get out the way. And so we see this as the outcome of 12 years of progressive development that we've been having in this country. And now we want to really launch this program. So again, thanks to everyone out there so far who has been able to give a donation. As of today, we now have the office secured. And then also, I'll be calling on you guys as well to interface and be part of the program and part of the education. Like presentations like this will be part of the educational curriculum. We'll be watching these videos and then dialoguing on these videos. Shakara does a lot of good education. I definitely want to do the scientific Garveyism classes as well here, utilizing his video and providing some elaboration. So it's geared at the community. We're not necessarily opening a school, but we will definitely be educating the people and providing them with tools that they need to better serve their own selves in the community. So that's what we'll be doing. And we'll also be doing some online classes as well. So one component will be online, and then there'll be the in-person. So it's not just creating a Mali center for Freetown. It will just be in Freetown, centered in Freetown. But we actually plan to provide Pan-African education and resources to the international world by transitioning and having it online as much as possible. And like I said earlier, it's located in the building with a radio station. So we will be going into radio. We do plan to actually start a radio program in partnership as well. So that's what's going on. We need more support. We need more help. We're right now fundraising for the furnitures. We're going to need a few PCs, personal computers that we can use for the storage of our information and regular working. We're also going to need, just regular materials, things that we're going to need from the day to day to get started. So January 1st is the date of our open house. We're going to open up, officially launch the programming here in Freetown. So if anybody out there has any collaborative efforts that they want to do within this realm of activities, please reach out to us. Again, you can go to basani.org and check out what the organization has going on. We're always seeking new membership. Just make sure you come correct. Make sure you come ready to work. You come ready to volunteer. You come ready to, service the people. That's what we're about. So the Mali Center will and continue to do this fundraiser. It's ongoing. So for now, the first goal has been met. The next goal is some furniture. We'll be doing an update. So an update video will be coming out. All right. So that's what I can say about the Mali Center for now. That's what's going on.
All right. What's up?
But hey, we're gonna get out of here. But hey, appreciate everybody who tuned in. Appreciate the Babas who came and gave us that expert wisdom. Shout out, special shout out, and a vote of appreciation for Brother Sam P.K. Collins.
Yes, sir.
Always brings the heat. The brother reminds me of Mumia. So you know, I love his work as a journalist and as an educator. All right, so we'll be here again on the 26th with another one. We'll be covering international issues, United States and its international policies. So we have a full education. We started off with Project 2025 and beyond. Today, we gave you United States government versus Black people. Next time, we'll give you United States government versus the world. All right? So y'all stay tuned. And again, support the movement. Salute.
What's up?
Why are we all of a sudden
BB for
having
ODA.
crisis in identity?
Right.
At the very moment, we also talked about what? Afrocentrism and African what? Centeredness. So right at this moment, when we are beginning to coalesce and to develop a concept of African identity and Afrocentrism, we are all now suddenly in a what? Identity crisis. Is the identity crisis really there, or is what going on an attempt to do what? Create an identity crisis? Because these people are well aware of what a full and wholesome identity will do to them. And they are aware that an African-centered identity represents the end of white power and of white oppression.